started this series on how to make a living using martial arts and self-defense training and teaching and so on a while ago, and I wanted to get into this next segment on another way of doing that because I received several questions from people who had been listening to the podcast about this, and today I'm going to talk about social media. Why? Well, it's funny. I was just listening to a podcast myself, and in there they mentioned that a lot of people, young people nowadays, when you ask them what do they want to become when they become adults and have to work, the answer is social media influencer. Now, we've come to the stage of the internet that this is an actual job. You can make a living that way. There are a lot of misconceptions. There are many young people, especially, who think that just because you see somebody on social media being successful, that they actually are. A lot of YouTubers, Instagram celebrities, and so on are struggling to make a living. And that is true even if you look at the high follower count that they have, the high engagement that they have, posts going viral, and so on. And still they have a hard time making a living. That doesn't sound like it's true, but unfortunately it is. And it's also a lot of work. It's also not easy because there is a saying in my country and it goes something like this: many are called, few are chosen. There's a lot of people who want to be the next big thing on social media. Very few people actually manage to do so. And what's more, they don't necessarily manage to do so in the long run. So today I'm going to cover a little bit of the basics when it comes to trying to earn a living on social media. I'm not saying it can be done. I am saying that it is work, lots of work. I've been on the internet for over 25 years now, a bit longer actually, and it's something that you've seen evolved if you start along with me back, a few decades ago. You've seen it evolve into something radically different from what it originally was. It was very much, the Wild West when I got on the internet, and lots of crazy stuff was on there. And now it's much, much different because it's become corporate. There are huge companies like Facebook and YouTube and so on who are basically running social media for everybody. Yes, there are smaller ones as well, but we're only going to look at the big ones right now because if you want to make a living, that's more than likely the way that you're going to go. So the main social media that I would talk about is YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and to a certain degree Twitter. And there's a few others, but if you start with those, I think that offers you the biggest reach, which is a huge part of what you're going for, reaching as many people as possible. What do you need to do? So let's start with the first one. You're creating a platform. You're building an audience that comes to you for your content, whatever that may be. If you follow me on social media, you notice that I do different things there. My Facebook page is not exactly the same as my Instagram page. YouTube is very different, and Twitter is different still. You don't have to do it that way, but it is my approach. The thing is that you want to make it informative, you want to make it fun, interesting, and so on, so that people have a reason to follow you. And that is actually a good way to start creating your platform is you pick a topic, you pick something that interests you make content, you put it out there, and you see what sticks. When it does, you do more of that. The danger with that is that if it's something that you might have an interest in, but maybe you're not passionate about, it's just something that is adjacent to what you're actually really talking about, and you mentioned that in offhand comment on the social media and it goes viral, then you're like, okay, this rings a bell. This connects with people. I'll have to do more of that. But if it's not really what you want to do, then you run into trouble right away. So virality doesn't mean that something is a long-term goal for you, even though trying to make clips and videos and posts go viral is what most social media influencers want. So the first thing you have to do is make content. Start making it, and I'll explain a little bit more how you can do that and so on in a minute. But that is the main thing you need to do. You have to create content. You can choose one platform. And if you look at a lot of the, for instance, big names on YouTube when it comes to martial arts and self-defense, you're going to discover that, for instance, on their Facebook or Twitter page or Instagram page, they have way less followers. So that's something that happens with people who focus on one specific platform of social media, and it's fine. I mean, to each his own. I'll get to the problems with that once you get into the caveats, once you get into the downsides and risks of going this route. And that'll be in a few minutes. But the point is that just because somebody is big on YouTube doesn't mean they're huge everywhere else. Every different platform requires specific strategies and tactics and types of content. What is your goal? Your goal, if you want to become a social media influencer or at the very least make a living on social media, let's say you start from scratch. Your goal is to get enough followers as quickly as possible so you can monetize that platform. What that means is that you need to be able to earn enough so that it generates an income, but at the same time, it also allows you to leverage that into creating different income streams. And I'll talk about those in a minute as well. So that is the goal. As quickly as possible, get sufficient amount of followers and views and so on, so that you can monetize and then branch out. I would suggest being active on all platforms, understanding that they're all different. For instance, Facebook is mostly people who are older than 30, 40, and so on. Because Facebook is an older platform that basically dominates that space. The young people are in many ways more active on TikTok and other social media platforms. So depending on the niche that you're going for, you're going to have to think about, okay, where should I be most active? And that will determine the type of content that you make. Because certain things are very, very successful on TikTok and they don't really work at all on, for instance, Facebook. So that's a lot of thinking that you have to do before you can actually start, really considering like, okay, what am I going to put on there as far as content goes? First, figure out what is the niche you want to go for, what is the target audience, and then figure out where will that target audience be. You can do some online research and you'll quickly find a lot of reports talking about who exactly is most active on which platform. So I would suggest doing that first, but then making a decision. Still doesn't mean you shouldn't be active on all the other platforms, but as soon as you start having a clear idea of where you're going, then go to where the audience is. Meet them there. Makes it so much easier as opposed to going to a platform where there's just a little small fraction of the target audience present. That's just an uphill battle. And there are established players there already. You are the person coming in from scratch. So you've got an uphill battle all the way until you get successful. So what should you do? You picked your niche, you've got your topics and so on. What should you do? Especially in the first few months, you want to have videos at least twice a week, but preferably 3 to 5 times a week if you are on, for instance, on YouTube or Instagram. Videos are not posts. Posting an article, posting a picture of something is not the same thing as making a video. Content is different. Content is not the same across the board. If you just post a joke, a funny picture, a meme or something, which is something I regularly do on Facebook, that can draw in a lot of attention. That can get a lot of shares and get a lot of people to look at your page. But on YouTube, that just doesn't work as much. There needs to be video. Instagram, similar, is pictures, yep, but increasingly the reels there are very important. Video becomes much, much more important due to the way that Instagram likes to promote reels. You've got the vertical camera as opposed to horizontal one. Portrait instead of landscape is what they prefer. You make different kind of content. So in that regard, I think YouTube is still the best platform for video content. It's the most versatile. You want to put out content 3 to 5 times a week. That's a lot. It doesn't have to be 5 hours long, but it needs to be regular. This helps the algorithm pick up on you, like that your channel is there, your account is there, you're putting out different content. It also allows the algorithm to promote more than one video to somebody who likes what they see of you. Let's say that you put out this awesome video on how to throw a right straight punch, and it gets picked up, and then you've got nothing else. You've got only a handful of videos because you've only done like one every 2 weeks, which is fine, but then the audience won't necessarily be able to see more of you and have a reason to subscribe to your channel, which is what you want. You want that following. You want people to subscribe, okay? A way around that is trying to make the best possible content 3 to 5 times a week, which is quite significant amount of time investing in creating and editing. It's a lot of work. But if you can do that, the algorithm has a chance of pushing your content more and more towards more and more people. And that should be the goal. The best way to do that is to have a schedule, is that you have different types of content. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. You have different types of content that comes out at specific dates, days in the week, and also specific times, depending on where your audience is. For instance, if your audience is in the US, well, you can actually look at, for instance, on Facebook. Facebook can tell you when your followers are most active. If there's more people active when you post it and they immediately watch and they start sharing, your content will go further and has a bigger shot at becoming viral than if you just post it in the middle of the night where the majority of your target audience is, and they only see it until the next morning, buried in their feed somewhere. So sticking to a schedule as that kind of advantage, and people eventually they will come to expect your videos and go look at them at those times, and that would be ideal for you, that they return to your channel when they expect a video to drop or some content to drop. For instance, Greg Ellerford, he has been for, I think it's 10 years longer, I forget. Every Friday he does a weekend knowledge dump. It's one of the things that I look forward to. It's sometimes 30 or 40 links to articles, videos, and so on that are interesting for self-defense, firearms, and so on. And he's been doing that consistently every Friday for years on end. People go to him just for that. So that is a way in which a schedule can help you actually get traction and get more people to follow you. So it's a good idea to do it, but it's difficult because life gets in the way. You've got a bunch of other stuff going on in your life. So it might not be as easy as it sounds. Now, if you do that consistently, 3 to 5 times a week, you bring out quality content, not crap, but good stuff. You stick to it at least a year, you've got a chance. I cannot tell you how many people I've seen who were talented, who were apparently good at creating content, editing videos, creating audio, and so on, getting good visuals, and have quality content, or have people create it for them, but they were the ones promoting it. And after a year or two, they're gone. They burn out. And I'll talk about that later as well, but you have to stick with it. It's extremely rare that somebody does one thing or two things on social media and it just blows up and he gets like millions of followers. That is extremely rare. It happens, but don't count on being the exception to the rule. Instead, do the work. It's going to be a lot of it, but then you have a shot. What are the downsides and the risks of all this? Well, the biggest downside of trying to use social media to earn a living is that you're at the mercy of the algorithm and the decisions that that company makes. When they change something to their platform, there's nothing you can do about that, and your business can be wiped out overnight. YouTube constantly changes its algorithm. Same thing with Facebook. Same thing with all the other platforms. They are constantly tweaking and, in their opinion, probably making it better. But that doesn't help you if the change they make suddenly means that your content just doesn't get as many eyeballs anymore, and you have a hard time reaching your audience. Another aspect is that if you over specialize, you might become obsolete. For instance, in the martial arts world, if you make a website and social media presence entirely dedicated to one MMA fighter, for instance, even if he's a young guy, he could get injured in his next fight and be out for years on end and maybe not fight anymore. And then you've wasted a year or two or maybe longer trying to promote your social media and get a lot of content going there and people following you because they were excited about that fighter, and then he gets injured and he's gone, and that's it. So if you over specialize, things might just be like, okay, it doesn't matter. I got a good example of that recently listening to Dan Carlin's podcast. It was one of the things he talked about with his guest is that there used to be a book that was bought out with a list of all the classical music recordings of certain pieces, like okay, that symphony of Bach or Mozart and so on. What was the best recording? Where can you get it? What is the name and so on? It's like a listing. And eventually that book didn't come out anymore. Why? Well, simply because the internet took over and you could find all that stuff on the internet. When I was young, when I was a young teenager, we had a book in the house with a listing of not all the movies in the world, but a big portion of them. Today, nobody would buy such a book because it would be so many volumes, it would be impractical. You've got IMDb, you've got the Internet Movie Database that you can consult for free and will tell you all you need to know about that book. You've got Wikipedia. So that is an example of how a business can eventually end up being completely obsolete because it's too specialized and life changes, something better comes along and you're gone. So take that into account when you start your social media, when you start your channel. Like it is, needs to be something that works in the long run and not just for a little while. And then the next point, and that is maybe the most important one, it is so easy to burn out. Again, I've been doing this for over 20 years. When I started, it was just a website because the internet was new. Then a few years later, blogging started becoming big. So I switched to that. It's a lot of work to keep up. In the meantime, I have several online businesses and social media platforms and so on. I've got 4 or 5 YouTube channels. I've got a bunch of stuff. Same thing with Facebook pages, 4 or 5 that I have to keep track of. So all that work is maybe worth it, but it is still a lot of work. And as long as you're not earning a living wage of that, you will be working part-time or full-time doing something else. And then you have to do all that social media work on top of that. That's a lot. A lot of people burn out. They give up. Um, a, an important thing to focus on is if you quit, it's gone. It's just over. So you won't achieve that goal that you want. But it's extremely discouraging. For instance, I remember when I started my blog, that wimsblog.com. I remember when I started it, when I was so happy that for the first time, the daily visitor count was more than single digits. I had 10, 11 visitors on one day. And I was extremely happy with that. And I very well remember how frustrating it was. Like, okay, I think I wrote a good article. Nobody's reading it. Nobody's sharing it, and so on. And like it can be hard to go on if that takes months or even years before you get some traction. That is something you should expect, and that is why burnout happens so much. And is simply because it's a slow road. Again, some people get lucky. Every now and then somebody comes onto the scene and they got something new, fresh that kind of hits with the audience. It just gels with the times that we're living and so on, and they just take off. but that is rare. That's extremely rare. So don't count on that happening to you. More likely than not, you're just going to have to work really hard. One thing that I can advise is that you give yourself a runway. What do I mean with that? Well, you schedule work in advance. You do batch processing, which means that, let's say you have to make videos. Okay, one day or one afternoon or one morning, you spend all your time editing and producing the video files. And then the rest of the week, or you can spend 2 days batch processing files. Doesn't matter what it depends on how much you do. But the rest of the time you do other things. Because if everything in your life is just every single day making videos, editing videos, putting them online, you risk burning out. What you can do is schedule it in a smart way so that you get the most bang for your buck time wise, and then do batch processing, which means that you do everything on the same day as much as possible. And you create a runway of content for 1 or 2 weeks or even longer. It means that you upload it already beforehand and you only need to publish it, hit the publish button, and then spread it on the other social media. But you have time to take a break if you need one, or you can focus on something else. That is what helps in the long run to stay motivated to continue. And again, it's not easy. It's very difficult for doing that for years. For instance, I've been on Patreon for now. This is my 6th year. I have over 400 videos that I put on there. It's a lot of work. Every month I make a lot of video content, including on Patreon. Doing that, and I enjoy it. That's not it, but it's still work that needs to be done. I work full time. I'm a full-time personal trainer. I do coaching sessions with clients. I do team building sessions in companies and so on. So I have a full day job that comes on top of it, and that is now 5 years I've been doing that into my 6th year. There's been times when it was tough, that I really wanted to do something else, but my patrons pay me for that, so they need to get the content. It needs to go out every month. So all this kind of stuff, again, it sounds fun when you see the results and you look like the big YouTubers and so on, that they're living the life, but you don't get there by simply being lucky and that's it. No, it takes hard work and dedication. A final caveat that I want to give is that this is something that I've seen a lot, for instance, on YouTube with guys who are into the martial arts and self-defense content that they put out there, is if you make absolutist statements, it get you clicks. If you say this is the best technique ever for XYZ, it will get you clicks, but you might regret it later because you might change your mind as you get older and have more training and more experience. Or it might turn out that you're wrong, that you made a mistake, and you will get confronted with that later on. People will find your content and say, like, okay, dude, you 2 years ago you said this, and now you say the opposite. Like, what's going on? So going for the clickbait title and exaggerated statements is very alluring, and it has its benefits, but it also has its downsides. For me, that's not what I like to do at all. And if that brings me less followers and so on, I really don't care. It's just something that I'm like, I'll do what I enjoy doing and what I think at the end of the day, I can still look in the mirror and knowing that I didn't rip anybody off selling nonsense, then I'm happy. Not everybody has the same mindset. All right, so that's it with all the downsides. Okay, let's look at content. So what do you need to do? Okay, first, you need to pick one or multiple categories of content. I'll give you a few. Instructional. How do you do a roundhouse kick? How do you block this? How do you train for that? And so on. So instructional can be just demonstrating techniques or really explaining something very specific. On my blog, you can go to the how-to guides, and there's dozens of articles that I've written, including sometimes videos, how to do this, how to do that. They tend to work quite well. If the quality is there, they tend to work. You can make jokes. You can make funny content. There's an audience for that. The main thing I would caution against is don't try to be funny. If you're not, don't try to be. If nobody laughs at your jokes, probably you're not as funny as you think you are. And that translates to the internet as well. Don't try to be funnier than you are. Don't try to fake it. Don't try to, be a stand-up comedian if you're really not. So, but people enjoy funny stuff, so there's definitely a category of content that is there. You can tell a story. For instance, recently I started posting a little bit more on my YouTube channel. I kind of neglected it. Why? Because I was so freaking busy doing everything else. So my YouTube channel had to take a backseat, and now I've kind of pivoted, and I'll talk about pivots later, to making 10, 15-minute videos when I'm sitting in my car in between appointments. Sometimes I have a little bit of time. Um, I just put my cell phone on top of the steering wheel, and then I start talking into my camera, and I upload it. No editing, nothing. It's just, it is what it is. And very slowly, there's a few that get a little bit of traction. Most of those videos not yet, because my audience is new to that, and it's not going to be to the liking of everybody. But that's just often me telling a story. I made a video talking about what is it like here in Europe to do martial arts in the 90s. That's 30 years ago. So you can tell stories. You can do motivational stuff. Try to motivate people and show, like, for instance, show like something that maybe somebody was struggling with, and then you show them overcoming that. Um, you can give hacks and tips and tricks, like, okay, do this to make your clinch game so much stronger. Here's a setup for an anaconda choke. Sorry, that might be something you haven't seen before. Or if you do the anaconda choke, make sure you watch out for this. So tips and tricks also work quite well, providing you're not just rehashing stuff that everybody's done again. Try to make it uniquely your own. It's your voice. It needs to be something that you bring to the table, not just looking at a bunch of other videos online and then just copying what they do, because that typically does not come across really well. You can make content about mistakes to avoid, like, avoid this mistake. This is the number one reason why this technique fails, and so on. Because a lot of people who look for that content are new to training. So they still make a lot of mistakes, and they sometimes can't figure out why something isn't working. And then that type of content can be quite interesting to them. And these tend to be people who will follow you for a longer time, because if you help them out once avoiding a mistake, they are relatively likely to follow you then, because you gave them good advice. And then something else which has become quite popular the last few years is sharing your personal development. And this is basically the hero's journey, which is, if you look at Joseph Campbell, who wrote Hero of a Thousand Faces, which is a book about storytelling, how, throughout history we have always told stories in a specific way. This is used in movies, in books, in marketing, in business, in many ways. It's basically, you all know that story. There's a young boy on a farm. He gets a call to adventure. Something happens. He goes into an adventure, and there's a bunch of stuff that happens in between. And the story ends with him coming back to the farm, but now he's no longer a boy. He's a man, and so on. So if you look at the original Star Wars movie, Luke Skywalker literally is a boy on a farm, because George Lucas, one of his mentors was Joseph Campbell. So he basically used the hero's journey in the Star Wars movies. That was one of the things he wanted to do. But this is something that's quite popular nowadays. People showing, like, okay, I'm crap, but I'm going on a journey to get better, and here you see me training and struggling, and so on. And people root for the underdog, and so on. The issue that I see is that very often, people who do that, they're a little bit, they're a little bit fake. It's acting. I'm not saying everybody, but there's a bunch of them out there that are just acting, and then it comes across as fake, and that, I believe in the long run will blow up in their faces. And again, nothing against those people, just that I don't think it's a sustainable business model, because the hero's journey is going to end at a certain point. You can't keep being horrible at training forever. Eventually, you gotta get good. And eventually there's really no point anymore following you. By that time, you're going to have to pivot, which I'll talk about in a minute. So that's as far as content goes. How will you present that content? Again, don't be fake. Don't pretend to be somebody you're not. People will spot that. Being inauthentic is the best way to turn off your audience, especially nowadays. Having an authentic voice is something that is extremely important because there's so much cookie cutter crap out there that people are like, I've heard this 50,000 times before. This guy isn't interesting. But if you are uniquely your own person. The way you say things and your personality, when it shines through, that might just connect with people. And that's what you need to do. Another aspect, practice. Practice a lot before you put something live out there. Um, you can go back on the YouTube channel of the podcast and you'll see some of the earlier work that I did. And it was just, compared to now, it wasn't really all that great. It wasn't bad for that time, but it wasn't great either. I've gotten significantly better. Why? Because I've been, I've done well over 100 podcast episodes now. So I got more practice. And that is something you need to do. Best way to do it, get a microphone stand, sorry, a tripod for your cell phone, put it in front of you, look in the camera of your cell phone, start talking. And then look at the recording on a big screen, not on your cell phone screen, on TV or on a laptop or a computer. Look on a big screen, see how you come across. Are you jittery? Are you not looking in the camera? Are you moving around too much with your head and with your body so it's distracting? Do you have certain tics that you weren't aware of? Do you say all the time? And so on. A lot of things that you will not be conscious of as you're talking because you're so focused on trying to do a good job. It takes practice. Just like anything else, it's not something that most people are automatically good at. Okay, so practice. Now you can put your first recording out there. I have nothing against that. Just don't expect it to be really awesome and attract a lot of people. Whereas if you bring something that is so much better quality wise because you've practiced for weeks and months on end before you started releasing live content, then I think you've got a better shot. So that's it content-wise. Filming and editing, I want you to go to episode 106. Go to wimsblog.com/106. And there I talk about making money with instructional videos and explain the basics. I've also put links to the equipment that I use, that you can use, and so on. I'm not going to go over filming and editing here. Listen to episode 106 and you'll have plenty of information there. Coming to another point, pivoting. So very, very few people manage to do social media channels with the same content over and over and over for years on end. Why? Because you burn out, like I mentioned before, or you will change. Your life changes, you change, and you are maybe less interested in certain things than you were when you started the channel. And it becomes a chore to make the content. Eventually you're going to give up. You're going to stop if you hate doing it. So sometimes you have to pivot and change what you're doing. When you do, understand that many channels lose a lot of their audience that way. Because a big chunk of your audience is coming for that specific content. Another chunk of your audience comes for you because they've gotten to know you, they think, a little bit through over the years. It is risky to pivot, but sometimes it's worth it. If the alternative is you giving up because you're so burnt out on that topic or on that niche, then I think it's worth it. There's an alternative that you should consider, and that is starting a second channel and try to have your audience follow you there so you don't have to start from scratch. If you could do that, you then still post regularly on your first channel, but just not as much anymore, as you try to draw the crowd over to the next channel, which is where you start a project that you're more passionate about or that you find more interesting than what you used to create on that first one. Worth considering. When do you do that? That's different for anybody. For everybody, sorry. It's going to depend on so many factors, so I can't really comment. When you start questioning, like, should I still be doing this? Maybe it's time to pivot. That would be a general rule of thumb. Right. So now we get to the fun part, which is what everybody wants. Say the best for last. Monetization. How can you earn a living? YouTube is the biggest game in town, and that is mostly going to be ads, advertising. YouTube has its own advertising system that it uses. You have to qualify. You have to have, I think, at least 1,000 subscribers, and I forget how many thousands of hours of views per year. It's not impossible to qualify, but if you do that, you can go into their ad program. What can you expect? Well, I'll give you a general rule, and that is, if you want to make $1,000 a month, you're going to need at least 100,000 views per month. 100,000. That's quite a lot. Is it guaranteed? Well, the problem is that it depends on many factors. You could make $1,000 with half that many views, or it could take you two or three times as much. Depends on the location where you're at. The advertising that is sent to the United States is usually worth a lot more than what is sent to some third world country or the Philippines or what have you. So location matters. Where is your target audience? Well, that's going to influence how much you can earn. The niche, the specialty product that you're talking about, or the topic that is not necessarily obscure, but not mainstream, that is also going to influence how many advertisers there are and how much money they spend on advertising. So there's a bunch of factors there that are difficult to give like a solid statement. It's going to be X amount of views per month, and then you start earning X amount of money. But as a general rule, $1,000, 100,000 views a month, that is a starting point. I do not overly focus on it, but it gives you an idea that if you only have like 5 or 10,000 views a month, which will be difficult to get at first, you're a long way from making a living. When you get 1 million views a month, that's when things really start to change. And again, it depends. You've got people with 1 million views a month who only make a few $1,000s. And you've got others who make like tens of thousands of that. So there's no one formula that you can follow. There's no one answer there. But this gives you an idea of the range. So that is what many YouTubers do. A word of caution, YouTube reserves the right to put advertising on your channel, even if you do not click the join the program button. Even if you don't want ads on your videos, they can still put them on there. I've had that. Somebody left my Patreon because I used to use unlisted videos on YouTube to host the video content that I did, and he left my Patreon because he said, "I pay for this. I don't want to see ads." He was already gone, and exit surveys are without names, so I often don't know why somebody leaves, even if they give an exit survey. I don't know who that is unless they tell me in the exit survey. But he was gone before I could actually talk about this, and I was like, "What's going on here?" And then I figured it out, eventually finding out information that YouTube thus put advertising on videos on their platform, even when somebody has ads turned off. So it's difficult. It didn't used to be that way, but it changed that not that long ago. So that's the most typical way. The other thing you could do is sell merchandise. Merchandise is also something that tends to be worth it once you get to the higher view counts. Teespring, for instance, for t-shirts, there's a bunch of them out there. You can sell a bunch of merchandise. If you don't have a big audience, nobody will buy it. Even with a big audience, not everybody wants to buy your stuff, and it's not going to be something that they buy every month. Buy a new t-shirt, unless you have a t-shirt channel, for instance. So you can set that up, but I wouldn't expect too much of it at first. Next up is sponsors and paid promoters. Paid promotions is that you show a product and you talk about it, or you've got a sponsor who wants you to mention his name X amount of times and so on. Again, if you're a big channel, it's going to help. If you're small, it's going to be difficult unless it's so specialized that certain companies will come looking for you to have sponsorship deals and to help them promote their stuff on your channel. So try to figure that out. Once they start knocking on your door, you can start looking for sponsorships, but again, you need to have high numbers first. Otherwise, they don't work with you. A lot of companies just work with agencies, big ad agencies. So it's not that easy to just knock on, I don't know, pick a car brand that you like because you've got a channel about cars, and you just go, contact headquarters of that company and ask, hey, will you guys sponsor me? It's not how it works. They don't have time for that. So sponsored and paid promotions. Next up is membership sites and programs. You can create your own. I use my Patreon as a membership site. It's got unique content that you don't get anywhere else. Only my patrons get that. They pay for it. I make them content every month. At least an hour and a half up to 2 hours and more every month of video content that I make every single month for them. And you don't get to see it anywhere else. That is something you can do. So that is trying to get your viewers and followers on social media towards a membership site. You can create your own. There's programs out there. You can create your own app. I would go for something like Patreon, Subscribe Star, and the like, because they have the infrastructure in place. They take a big cut out of whatever you sell, whatever memberships you have, but you don't have the headaches of having to fix all the problems that happen when you when something goes wrong, if it's on your own website, on your own server or whatever, that you're hosting everything. And trust me, I've tried that. I've had my own membership site on my website. It was a catastrophe. Why? Because technology was not there and it was just a big mess that I always had to fix. You want to be in the business of creating content, not running websites. It's not the same thing. So next up is affiliate marketing. Much that you can do with affiliate marketing is basically you sell somebody else's product and you get a percentage of that. It could be products, services, membership sites, Amazon products. That's very big, having Amazon links. And I actually just started because Amazon contacted me, like my Amazon shop, quote unquote, which is just lists of stuff that I use and that I recommend. Don't have to buy something, but if you do, I get a small percentage of that. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I made a couple of them. It's like, and this is actually the stuff that I use, or the stuff that I like. Okay, I've worked with this, or I know this brand. If this is what you're looking for, give this product a try. Those can be interesting, but again, you have to be high up in subscriber and view count for that to be something that generates a decent amount of income. Can happen, and they also come with their own requirements. For instance, Amazon wants you to put some type of description before that or right after that link towards products that are on their site, clearly stating that this is an affiliate link or that you get you get a small commission out of this. You have to put that in there. It's legally speaking also obligatory, so you can't really well, you could do anything you want, but they reserve the right to kick you out of the program if you don't do that, because it can be seen as misleading advertising. So, and that has legal aspects that I'm not going to go into here. So next up, we have brand partnerships. If, let's say, I don't know, you have you do a channel about skateboarding or about MMA equipment and so on, that you get a big brand name that wants to work with you, and they pay you for a sponsorship shout out every content that you create. You make a video, you have to shout them out and so on. Or they can send you products to review that you can then keep, or that you can sell, or that you can do giveaway to your members to create more followers and so on. That can work as well. However, it's something that again only happens when you've got a fair amount of traction already. And the last way that I think is interesting for monetizing your platform is investors. And that is companies that give you a contract and then they give you a bunch of money to create content and be better at it. that is pretty much only for the big boys, the big channels with millions of followers. They get investors who are interested in them. Then if you get to that point, you'll normally make enough money that you can hire lawyers who will hash out that contract. Because typically what you have nowadays is what happened a while ago in the music industry is called 360 contracts. It's a contract that basically gives the company that you sign up with, they own everything you do, pretty much. And you have to create the content, but you've got nothing is left that is yours. It becomes theirs every time you publish it or you make it. I would be very careful with that because you own, in principle, the copyright to everything you create. And copyright is something that you need to protect. You can make licenses, but giving it away or signing a contract in which it states that you make this video, but it's the company who owns it now, that in the long run is a difficult proposition to follow because you might hit on something that is just really, really successful, and then you don't own it. You don't get to monetize it. The company does. So think twice about that. But again, once you get to that point, you're already pretty big. You're making money, and then it's going to be the time to start talking with lawyers and creating your own company and so on. This is like long term, high success stuff that you shouldn't worry about right now. But you need to know it exists. Finally, some stuff that you need to do is you don't have to, but you can start paying for services like Social Blade, which is going to give you a lot of analytics for researching your own channel, the competition, what kind of keywords do they use, what topics do they work with, generate some topics that you might want to talk about or make content about. SEMrush is another one, which is keyword research and more. So there's a bunch of services that you can basically subscribe to. Typically, it's a monthly fee. It can range anywhere from free alternatives to a few bucks to hundreds and hundreds of dollars every month. I would be cautious with that at first because it's easy to burn money. It's a lot more difficult to earn it. So I would be careful in immediately, spending money on a monthly fee on something that is cool to work with. Because I've worked with some of this stuff. I don't anymore, but I've tried them out. Um, but it's much easier to lose that money than to earn it back and use those services in such a way that they actually augment your income instead of just costing you. There needs to be a benefit there. It's not as easy as it sounds. The marketing copy makes it sound so easy, but it's just not how it works. So that's pretty much it. I tried to give you guys a full tour of everything that is involved with becoming a social media influencer or creating content on social media to earn a living. It is possible to do, but please don't be under the impression that it's easy to do. Um, the best way that you can describe it is this: is try to think about the times that when you looked at a video online that somebody was doing martial arts self-defense and it was just so bad, it's crap, and everybody laughs, everybody thinks it's funny, but the person in the video actually means it. You can tell that they actually, they did their best and they think they're actually doing good instructional stuff. And the rest of the world thinks like this is total nonsense and they laugh at you. So getting to the point where you make quality content is like with anything in life, work and perseverance. And if you can muster up those two, you've got a shot just like anybody else. My way of viewing things, I, I'm I'm not a social media guy. I use them, but I don't want to be in that rat race of making 4 or 5 videos every week and just ending up totally burning myself out on it. I've got so much other stuff that I want to do in my life that I am doing, and I already have. For instance, I've got 2 Patreons. One on my blog, wimsblog.com. There's another one, MMAformula.com. which is focused. That's my MMA channel, which again I had to take a back seat to everything else that I was doing for the last few years. But it's still up and running, and I still post something once a month. So all that to say that it all sounds great in theory, but in practice, it's not as easy. And if you think this is for you, I would use this episode here as a starting point to research so much more a lot of topics that I mentioned. You can start looking for them online and articles on how to do that and how to use that, and you'll be able to spend a lot of time researching and eventually figuring out of, okay, this is what I want to do or not. And if you do, by all means, jump in with both feet, go for it, and become extremely successful. I hope that you can achieve that. And if it's not for you, that is fine. There's plenty of other stuff that you can do with your life. Well, that's it, guys. Thank you for listening. As always, like, share, subscribe, and so on. And I'll talk to you next time.